All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. The United States sent diplomats back to Pakistan today for a second round of negotiations with Iran over their nuclear program, but Iran has not yet clarified whether or not they will be sending their diplomats to negotiate with the United States. So lots of mixed messaging on that issue. We'll be discussing that today. Also, just this weekend, the United States attacked an Iranian cargo ship in the Strait of Hormuz. That leaves all sorts of possibilities for escalation that we will be discussing today. And finally, we will also be talking about Trump's recent announcement just this morning that Israel had nothing to do with Trump launching this war. And of course, we all know how ridiculous that is. We will be dissecting his Truth Social post about that today. All this today and more on the Quest for Clarity podcast.
It is about who we are. It is about what we believe.
They're building up this case just like we did in Iraq. Build up the war propaganda. There was no Al-Qaeda in Iraq.
The more you tell the truth, the stronger you become.
Mr. Speaker, we're not rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic tonight. We're putting coal in the boiler and setting a course for the iceberg.
Maybe we should improve the liberty of our own country before we seek to do so abroad. Some of us have paid attention to the fact that the expert class, including the foreign policy experts, lie all the time. The correct answer to this, of course, as it always is liberty. All right, everybody, before we begin, if you wouldn't mind going right down below this video and hitting like and subscribe, I'd really appreciate that. Also, if you could please go to my Instagram, X, Spotify, and my Substack and give all of those a follow, I'd really appreciate that as well. Let's get into this here. We're going to start off by discussing the negotiations, or at least the potential negotiations, in Pakistan today. The United States sent diplomats to Pakistan, not including J.D. Vance, at least according to the reporting at the moment. There was actually a lot of confusion this morning over who was actually sent by the United States to lead these negotiations, because yesterday, or I should say this weekend, as we were hearing about the potential of these talks being floated from both sides, the original reporting was that Trump was actually going to not have J.D. Vance go back, most likely because of the failure of negotiations that went down last week in Islamabad, Pakistan, led by J.D. Vance, where J.D. Vance called Trump, according to reports, at least six times, had no authority to make a deal, was not equipped with any of the relevant information for these negotiations. That's all based on the reporting. J.D. Vance was very ill-equipped to actually be negotiating with the Iranians. And apparently Trump this weekend made the decision not to send J.D. Vance to lead these negotiations and instead tasked Witkoff and Kushner, who are basically acting as envoys for the United States, to lead these discussions with the Iranians, most likely Masoud Pezeshkian, their president, and Abbas Araghchi, their foreign minister. So this was the talk over the weekend, and at this point, this morning, there was actually the rumor being floated that Vance did in fact go to these negotiations in Pakistan, but that was also put to bed when reports came out saying that he was not on the plane and was not on his way to Pakistan. So there's a lot of confusion around these reports of negotiations. And at the same time as the confusion here in America, there is also confusion as to whether Iran is going to be even engaging at all in these negotiations, because they've had mixed signals as well. Originally, the Iranians were saying as long as the blockade is in place, that is the United States blockade on the Strait of Hormuz, which the U.S. kept in place as Iran opened the Strait of Hormuz, Iran is saying as long as that blockade is in place, they will not be negotiating. That blockade is still in place, and in fact, just this weekend, as we'll get into in a bit, the United States actually attacked an Iranian cargo ship in the Strait of Hormuz. So let's get into this here, just amidst all this confusion. Let's read this morning, this is from last night at 10 p.m., This is from Reuters discussing what we know at this point about these negotiations that may or may not be happening with Iran and Pakistan. It says, quote, Iran is considering attending peace talks with the United States and Pakistan, a senior Iranian official told Reuters on Monday, following moves by Islamabad to end a U.S. blockade of Iran's ports, a major hurdle for Iran to rejoin peace efforts. However, the official stressed that no decision has been made. Adding to the uncertainty, a source told Reuters that Vice President J.D. Vance was still in the U.S., denying reports that he was already on his way to Pakistan's capital, Islamabad, for talks. With a 2-week ceasefire set to expire, the senior Iranian official said Tehran was, quote, positively reviewing its participation, but no final decision has been made. The comments conveyed a clear change of tone from the earlier statements ruling out attendance and pledging to retaliate for U.S. aggression. The Iranian official said mediator Pakistan was making positive efforts to end the U.S. blockade and ensure Iran's participation. And also this also adds to the kind of context of these discussions. Pakistan is still acting as the mediator. Their Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif is acting as kind of a mediator between the Iranians and the United States, trying to bring both sides closer together and trying to get them at least talking and at least discussing the potential of extending the ceasefire or making some sort of light deal to get out of this conflict. And this brings up an important point, this article. Tomorrow, today's Monday, tomorrow, Tuesday, is when the 10-day ceasefire is expired. It ends tomorrow on Tuesday. This is where we actually have to ask the question, what is the point of these talks at this point? So we have statements from yesterday of Donald Trump saying he is most likely not going to push the ceasefire back, not going to extend the ceasefire past Tuesday. So by all available indications, all available evidence, again, things could very much change, but by all available evidence, this ceasefire is going to end tomorrow. And it'll either end with a deal or without a deal. How in the world is and Trump has been saying also that he wants a comprehensive deal. He doesn't want some quick deal. He wants a comprehensive, all-encompassing deal to end hostilities entirely, to end all tensions with Iran and the United States. How in the world is that going to be reached over the next 24 hours? It's almost impossible to even imagine that, because what that would involve, if we're talking about a process of either removing enriched uranium, which is already something that Iran still says is a red line. Trump says that they want no nuclear enrichment. Iran says that's not happening. So already at the outset, we have two completely diametrically opposed positions, two people still very maximalist on either side. That's number one. Number two, say there was let's say Iran completely capitulated and said, we will give up all of our enriched uranium. We will put limits on our nuclear stockpile in the future, or our enriched uranium stockpiles in the future. We will stop at this. Say there is some sort of deal involved here about the actual specifics of their nuclear systems. This would involve scientists from both sides, actual nuclear experts from both sides, which have not gone with the United States, at least weren't present in the first round of negotiations. The United States basically came with about half the size of delegation that Iran came with. It involved no experts on nuclear. This would involve international mediators from different international organizations that supervise and just that overlook the nuclear programs of all these countries. This would involve a comprehensive, probably multi-month effort. I've heard reports saying it would take probably 6 months to come up with a real comprehensive sticking deal between the United States and Iran that goes as in depth as Trump is claiming to want to on nuclear, to actually do what Trump wants to do and remove all the enriched uranium, number one, without there being hostilities, to actually put real limits and install an inspections regime back into Iran. This would involve months of experts negotiating back and forth and discussing this, international organizations being involved. This is not going to happen in a 12-hour meeting in Islamabad, Pakistan, between both sides, the foreign minister and the vice president. That's not going to happen. So the question is, we really have no idea. That's the gist of this. We have no idea what's going to happen by tomorrow. We've heard maximalist threats from Donald Trump again. He is again floating this threat of bridge and power plant day again, and is saying that if Iran doesn't make a deal, then the bombs are going to start falling again. And this maximalism from Iran that they're still publicly stating, they will not give up their enriched uranium, they will not give up their ability to have this nuclear hedge. This leaves us with the question, in 12 hours of negotiations, with Iran still not clarifying whether or not they're going to be in Pakistan for these talks, what are we expecting to come out of this? It's just very confusing at this point. We don't really know much beyond the reporting that we have in front of us, which is very empty in terms of substance at this point. Let's move on now to the events of yesterday. We had, as I said, let's go back a second to what we said on Friday. For the last couple days, we've seen a lot of developments with the Strait of Hormuz. At first, on Friday, it was announced that Iran was going to open up this. So this came after Israel reached a ceasefire with Lebanon, which they violated. But officially, Israel and Lebanon are in the middle of a 10-day ceasefire. Israel and Lebanon had agreed to this. And then in response to that, Iran said, okay, now that the original points of this ceasefire from a couple weeks ago have been reached, we will open the Strait of Hormuz in this kind of limited fashion along this route. We will basically facilitate, we're not giving up control of it. We will facilitate the shipments. We will facilitate some ships leaving the Strait of Hormuz along this route that we have chosen. And in response to that, Trump basically framed it as if Iran gave up control of the Strait of Hormuz and said that the United States will maintain its blockade on Iranian ports, meaning ships leaving and going to Iranian ports will not be allowed to go through. And this was not apparently part of the deal that Iran was thinking. And Iran said if the United States does not remove their naval blockade of their ports, then they will close the Strait of Hormuz again. And so the opening of the Strait of Hormuz basically lasted about 12 hours, it looked like, and Iran once again announced they are closing the Strait of Hormuz. So as we speak right now, the Strait of Hormuz is effectively closed again. So the openness of the Strait of Hormuz lasted only a couple hours before Iran once again closed it. So this is where we stand now. They are saying that they will not negotiate in Pakistan as long as the naval blockade that the United States has in place stays in place. That is why Pakistan and Shehbaz Sharif, their prime minister, are trying desperately to get the United States to remove that blockade. Because as long as that blockade is there, Iran is saying, we're not negotiating. So this is the sticking point. There's a lot of talk in the media about the calming of tensions and the opening of the Strait of Hormuz. But if you actually read past the headlines, both sides, like this is what I'm talking about. We hear from Trump's Truth Social posts and Fox News that there has been a lot of progress made and that Iran is just on the verge of capitulating. When, if you look at the underlying factors, if you look at the dynamic in the Strait of Hormuz, for example, and if you look past Trump's Truth Social post and actually look at aerial footage of ships that are able to leave and go through, this talk of the Strait of Hormuz being open for business is just false. It's not true. No ships at this point are really going through. Very few. Trump is claiming there are significantly more ships going through than there actually are because it is basically closed. And this talk of progress being made and Iran being on the verge of capitulating, that doesn't match with any available evidence that Iran is from anything Iran is saying. In order to believe that, you inherently have to just have a blind trust of whatever the government is telling you. Because there's just no available evidence you could show to show that Iran is on the verge of capitulating, giving up all of their nuclear capabilities, their enriched uranium, I mean, and giving up having a civilian nuclear program at all, giving up ties to the Houthis and Hezbollah, giving up their drone and missile programs. In order to think that they are about to cave on any of these things, like Trump acts like they are, you must necessarily have a blind trust in the Truth Social posts of Trump and not look any deeper, not read drop site news in the morning, not look at the Wall Street Journal. You have to look at nothing else in order to believe that. You have to just have a blind trust in the state TV of Fox News and the Truth Social posts of the president. Because once you look an inch deeper than that, you realize that's just not true. Iran still has their entirely maximalist position. They are actually making demands of the United States. The Iranian 10-point plan, which they still believe is the one that Trump accepted when he first announced the ceasefire, that 10-point plan demanded that the United States leave the region. Like all of our bases in the region needed to be out, according to that 10-point plan. It also announced that Iran was going to maintain control of the Strait of Hormuz and be allowed to pay tolls. This was the new status quo. So, amongst many other concessions from the United States. So, Iran is still saying that is what Trump accepted. Trump is saying he didn't, but that is where Iran's mentality is at. They are still thinking they are in a position to make demands on the United States. So, when Trump makes it seem that Iran is on the verge of total capitulation, that's just flies in the face of everything that is publicly available. It's just, there's no truth to it. That is where we are right now with that. Now, just this weekend, we had the United States boarding an Iranian ship in the Strait of Hormuz. This has the potential, it hasn't had anything yet, but it could have had the potential to cause massive tensions. Here was the video from CENTCOM. CENTCOM released the video of this. Here was the video of U.S. forces attacking this Iranian cargo ship. Take a look.
Motor vessel Tosca. Motor vessel Tosca. Vacate your engine room. Vacate your engine room. We're prepared to subject you to disabling fire.
Okay, we gave the flare. Now we're
Now, for more detail on this, here was the New York Times article on it. It says, quote, President Trump said on Sunday that the U.S. military attacked and seized custody of an Iranian-flagged cargo ship that had tried to maneuver around the U.S. blockade of Iranian ports hours after he and an Iranian official exchanged accusations of ceasefire violations in the Strait. A U.S. Navy destroyer intercepted the cargo ship in the Gulf of Oman and quote, gave them fair warning to stop. Mr. Trump wrote in a post on social media, quote, the Iranian crew refused to listen, so our Navy ship stopped them right in their tracks by blowing a hole in the engine room. He added that the ship, the Tuxa, was under U.S. sanctions and that the United States was, quote, seeing what's on board. The attack on the Iranian ship, which was not immediately confirmed by Iran, is sure to raise tensions in the already escalating standoff over the Strait. Early on Sunday, Mr. Trump accused Iran of firing on ships passing through the Strait in, quote, a total violation of our ceasefire agreement. This is the tension that still exists, and this is what I mean by underlying dynamics. When we hear that the Strait of Hormuz is completely open, yet Iran closes it and then launches and attacks on ships in the Strait of Hormuz. Yet we're all told that the Strait of Hormuz is completely open, that these ships need to grow a pair and go through anyways for the sake of the economy globally. This is the messaging. You'd have to, in order to believe the hubristic announcements of Trump's Truth Social posts, you need to turn off your eyes and ears to any other media besides Truth Social, because none of the actual facts of the matter match the braggadocious truths of Trump. It doesn't make any sense. And that is this attack this weekend. It just signifies the tensions between the two countries that are still in effect as we head into supposedly a second round of negotiations. If these negotiations are to be successful, then this prime minister of Pakistan better really get some concessions from both sides here, because they are still so far apart on where they both are in terms of what they want. Both sides are announcing red lines. Both sides are making demands that really are unimaginable. It is as much as I would like the United States to leave the Middle East and get rid of all our international bases and focus our attention here at home, that is unimaginable at this point, that the United States, and especially given the context, if the United States was to evacuate all their bases from the Middle East in this fashion after a war with Iran, it would basically be as if we just completely waved the white flag and left. That is unimaginable to imagine that the United States would do that at this point. So with demands so far apart at this point, it's really hard to see how there's a deal met by tomorrow when the ceasefire expires. And speaking of that, Trump had an interview this morning with PBS News where he said lots of bombs are going to start going off if a deal is not met by tomorrow. And here is that article, and it also includes the interview with Trump here. It says, quote, President Donald Trump told PBS News on Monday morning that if the ceasefire with Iran expires Tuesday, quote, then lots of bombs start going off. The statement came during a phone call with White House correspondent Liz Landers, focused on the Iran war as the U.S. delegation is prepared for more peace talks. Here are the highlights from the call. PBS News asks, what happens if the ceasefire expires tomorrow evening? Trump says, then lots of bombs start going off. PBS News says, is Iran still participating in the talks that will be happening in Islamabad? Will they still be there? Trump says, I don't know. I mean, they're supposed to be there. We agreed to be there, although they say we didn't. But no, it was set up. And we'll see whether or not it's there. If they're not there, that's fine too. PBS News asks, what do you want from the negotiating team in Islamabad? Trump says, no nuclear weapons. Very simple. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Very simple. And then PBS News asks, Kushner has a lot of business and financial interest in the Middle East region from Saudi Arabia and other countries. Is it appropriate for him to be negotiating there, do you think? Trump says, well, he was there before, long time before, and he's purely negotiating for the fact that they're not going to have a nuclear weapon. Whether you have business or not, everybody knows that's the right thing. He's a very good negotiator. So that's an interesting point from the PBS lady there. does Jared Kushner's business ties. And also, by the way, Steve Witkoff has a lot of business ties with these Gulf states that are pushing for Trump to continue this war in Iran. We have states, of course, like the UAE, which is basically just a U.S. sock puppet. You have states like Saudi Arabia and Bahrain and Kuwait. All of them are pushing for the United States to continue this war with Iran. And speaking of countries pushing us into this war, Trump had a Truth Social post this morning where he ripped into everybody who says that Israel is the reason for this war. And we'll read the Truth Social post first, and then we'll discuss why obviously this is a large reason for this war is because Israel lobbying for it here in the United States. Trump says this morning, quote, Israel never talked me into the war with Iran. The results of October 7th, added with my lifelong opinion that Iran can never have a nuclear weapon, did. I watch and read the fake news pundits and polls in total disbelief. 90% of what they say are lies and made up stories, and the polls are rigged, much as the 2020 presidential election was rigged. Just like the results in Venezuela, which the media doesn't like to talk about, the results in Iran will be amazing. And if Iran's new leaders, regime change, are smart, Iran can have a great and prosperous future. Just on that last point, that there's been a regime change in Iran, that's obviously just not true. That's not up for debate. There's been no regime change in Iran. The leaders of the regime is still very much intact. That's the point. There has been no regime change in Iran. The IRGC is still in charge in the country. And according to the CIA's own assessment from a couple days into this war, regime change was off the table. That's just not like a likely outcome here. And we can also tell that's not true because Mark Levin and Ben Shapiro and all of the pro-war people are very much still advocating for Trump to follow through with a regime change. Why would they be advocating for that if it wasn't true? Trump says he listens to Mark Levin. Well, if he did, he'd know for sure that regime change had not been completed yet, because if it was, Mark Levin would probably not be advocating for it every single day on his show. So that's number one. But on the issue of Israel dragging us into this war in Iran, that's just crazy that he would say that this has played no factor. Of course he has to, because that would mean he's being controlled by Israel. But just a couple weeks ago, or I believe it was a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, we had that bombshell New York Times report that discussed the meeting in February that Netanyahu and the head of Mossad had in the Situation Room with Trump, where they basically did a slideshow presentation lobbying him into this war with Iran and saying that this would be an easy, quick war, and selling him on this quick strategy to overthrow the regime and get rid of all the enriched uranium. They sold him on this completely. And according to the report, that was when Trump made up his mind to go to war against the wishes, actually, of his own cabinet. Marco Rubio, John Radcliffe, J.D. Vance, all of them, apparently, according to this article, they had quotes from these people saying that that the Israelis were lying, that there was that they were selling him a false story here, that there was no way that it was going to be this easy. All of them, the CIA guy, the Secretary of State, and Trump just completely bought the Israeli narrative. And that apparently is when Trump made up his mind to launch the war. It was just a matter of when at that point. They basically sold him on this operation of regime change being quick and easy against the wishes of his own cabinet, the Secretary of State, CIA Director John Radcliffe, J.D. Vance. They're all quoted in there saying how the Israelis are lying, that it's not going to be this easy, that this is just totally not true. Yet Trump, apparently, according to the article, made up his mind at that point to go to war with Iran. It was just a matter of when at that point. And how many times has Netanyahu visited the United States at this point? I think it's like 7 or 8 times he's been to the United States. Every single time. What is this? What are the reports from Axios and the New York Times? Every time Netanyahu comes to visit, he says they never talked to. Is that what he said? He said Israel never talked me into the war with Iran. Okay. How many times did we get reports from Barack Ravid at Axios? We got one that this was 100%. We talked about it here on the show after his meeting over New Year's back in January and December. The main point of the meeting between Netanyahu and Trump at that point was Iran. Netanyahu spent the entire time trying to lobby him into war with Iran, because that's when and just very conveniently, just pointing out how very convenient the timing was, that is when we started seeing the mass protests in Iran that the Mossad said they were on the ground for, that Mike Pompeo said the Mossad was on the ground for, that we now know the U.S. was helping arm through Iraqi Kurdistan into Iranian Kurdistan. This was all happening at the very same time, just conveniently. That is when Netanyahu was trying to get Trump to overthrow Iran back then. Almost every other meeting with Netanyahu over the course of 2025 as well, we hear reports that Netanyahu is pushing Trump to strike Iran. Netanyahu and Mike Waltz, the former national security advisor, were negotiating through encrypted messages to get Trump on board with Iranian airstrikes. That's why Mike Waltz got fired. That's the real reason. They didn't tell you this in the mainstream media. That's the real reason that Mike Waltz got fired, because it was discovered to have been texting with the Prime Minister of Israel behind Trump's back, lobbying for him to get into war with Iran. Like, this notion that Israel played no role in this is just totally false. It means you know nothing about this conflict if you think Israel has no role in pushing us into this war. There is just no way to assess the backstory and the build-up to this war without understanding and articulating the role that Israel played, Netanyahu specifically, in lobbying Trump into this war. It's just, to tell us that Israel played no role is to just blatantly lie in our face, and it's just insane. It's the most blatant lie someone could tell, honestly, at this point. But that is where we will leave it off for Trump at this point. We have a couple clips I want to show you here before we end off. Mike Waltz was on with Jonathan Karl yesterday on the Sunday shows on ABC, and Jonathan Karl actually did a good job at pressing Mike Waltz on the issue of Trump's threats to blow up every bridge and every power plant in Iran. Jonathan Karl's like, would that not obviously be a war crime? Now, forget what you think about international law, but under international law, yes, blowing up every bridge and every power plant, civilian or not civilian, would be a war crime, like, obviously. And here is Mike Waltz trying to fight with Jonathan Karl over this very obvious fact. Take a look.
And if they don't agree, is the president really prepared to go back to full-on war, extending this war well beyond what he originally said it was going to be 4, 5, maybe 6 weeks? We're now going into week 8. Is he prepared to do what he threatened here? He said destroy every power plant and every bridge in the country, full-on, in-depth war extended in the Middle East. He's ready for that?
Well, all options are on the table, absolutely. Unlike his predecessor, President Trump doesn't publicly take options off the table and tell our adversaries what he's not going to do, therefore giving them leverage. All options are on the table. We could take that infrastructure out relatively easily. The Iranian air defenses have been absolutely decimated. And just to get ahead of a lot of the critics and hand-wringing, throwing out irresponsible terms like war crimes, attacking, destroying infrastructure that has clearly and historically been used for dual military purposes is not a war crime. I mean,
Mr.
we've heard
Ambassador,
that from Democratic lawmakers. We've heard that from others, and it is irresponsible and just flat wrong.
But Mr. Ambassador, let me be clear. The president today said that he would knock out every single power plant and every single bridge in Iran. He's not just talking about those that are supporting the military infrastructure. He's saying every bridge and every power plant in the country. That wouldn't be a war crime?
That would be an escalatory ladder. And if you go back in the history of warfare, go all the way back to World War II, of course, we bombed and took down bridges, other infrastructure, power plants that, yes, could be used for civilian, but also are used to manufacture drones and missiles. And the Iranian regime in particular and its terrorist proxies have a long history of actually deliberately hiding military infrastructure in hospitals, schools, neighborhoods, and other civilian assets. So they are they have no ground to stand on, number one. Number two, they have a long history of commingling. Number three, it's perfectly acceptable in the rules of land warfare. And number four, the Iranian regime is launching drones and missiles directly into civilian homes, hotels, and resorts across the Gulf. So this is just a ridiculous argument we've heard in the media, from the Iranians, and frankly, from some lawmakers here at home.
I mean, again, hitting every single bridge, every single power plant in the country goes beyond simply those that support the military infrastructure.
Now, this is the argument. The argument is that they are dual use. This is always the argument for blowing up civilian infrastructure that could possibly be used by the regime at one point or another. Like, that means anything is justified because a regime could use an apartment. Someone from the regime could live in an apartment building. This is the same justification for blowing up like every building in Gaza, like 86% of the buildings in Gaza, is because someone from Hamas lived in that building. This means we can just kill innocent people indiscriminately. We can blow up civilian infrastructure because it could possibly be used by the Iranian regime to ship weapons or something. Like, obviously, that is not a good justification for mass murder, but that is the justification that's always used by people like Mike Waltz to justify these massacres of civilians across the world. Now, the clip I want to end off here is from Senator Roger Marshall of Kansas. He was on Newsmax just the other day, probably about a week ago. I just never got to showing this clip, but it's a very telling clip. The Republicans, as we head into the midterms, have very little to run on at this point. They've been told not to discuss mass deportations by James Blair at the White House. He told the Republican congressmen who are running for re-election to not even say the word mass deportations because it's so unpopular, and it's just not true. We have not done mass deportations. They can't run on the economy because the gas prices are ridiculous because of this war. Grocery prices are still up. Inflation is still up. They can't run on the economy. So what is there to run on? They have to try and twist themselves into a pretzel and say that this war has been a major success. And that actually, according to Roger Marshall, the pitch is this: national security is more important than your pocketbook. This is the insane marketing that they're going with, the insane sloganeering that we're hearing from Senator Roger Marshall as we head into the midterms. Here is the clip of him on Newsmax telling Americans that they need to understand the reason that they are paying a ridiculous amount for groceries and gas right now is because Iran. Take a look.
We're the leading producer of oil in the world. We're exporting more than we're importing. We're not standing in lines. That overall wages have been growing faster than inflation under this president. Here it is. It's going to be tax day very soon, and Americans are going to get an extra $1,000 or $1,500 rebate as well. So I'm sorry the gas prices are going up, but help is on its way. And your national security, yes, is even more important than your pocketbook.
So let me just get this straight. We never have to justify why Iran was a threat to the United States. We never have to justify why this war was necessary right now. All we have to do, in order to convince you that you must suffer the high prices in exchange for this war, is say your national security was at risk. We've been at war for 47 years, except we never discussed that war until the minute we launched this operation. And now you just have to accept these high gas prices for the foreseeable future, these high grocery prices for the foreseeable future, because your national security, which we have not established there was a threat to, is more important than your pocketbook, than your weekly budget at your house. We never have to justify why the national security of the United States was at threat by Iran, because it wasn't, so they couldn't justify it. They never actually have to justify there was a threat to the country. They never have to justify this notion that you were at risk from Iran. You personally were actually at risk of being killed by Iran or something. None of that ever has to be justified. They just get to say it. And because they state it, apparently it's fact. And instead, they'll throw you these think tanked slogans like we've been at war for 47 years. Even though during this recent election we had in 2024, neither candidate was running on the fact that we've been at war with Iran for 47 years. You'd think that would come up once during the most recent presidential campaign. This obvious factor that we've been at war with Iran for 47 years. If it were real, you'd think somebody would campaign on that. You'd think at least that would be brought up in a debate, like, what are you going to do about this 47-year-long war we've had with Iran? If it were real, it certainly would have been brought up. But instead, to justify their offensive war of aggression, their war of choice, they need to tell you that this war has actually been going on for a lot longer than most of you have even been alive. And that for that reason, you must turn off your brains. You must be happily accepting of increased prices at the grocery store and increased prices at the gas pump because your national security is at risk, even though it's not. If this is what they're running on, then good luck, Republicans. They just deserve to lose at this point. It's so bad. When you vote for a party as overwhelmingly as the Republicans won in 2024, in the presidency, in the House, in the Senate, and they betray everything they ran on so egregiously and so obviously and transparently, you cannot vote for that again. You can't. If you're congressman or if you're senator is up for re-election, and they have been saying this garbage about Iran over the past month, that we've been at war for 47 years and that they were a threat to America, you need to not vote for them. Doesn't mean you vote for the Democrat, because the Democrat is probably bad as well, obviously. But you don't give validity to people who insult you to your face so blatantly and obviously. If people think you are so stupid where they are going to tell you that you've been at war with Iran for 47 years and that this war was necessary, then you don't give them your vote. You don't give them your vote if they're going to insult you like that. Because why would they deserve it? What have they done to earn your vote? If they are running on a policy of raising your prices and launching a war for Israel, then sorry, you don't get my support. I don't take 2 hours out of my day to go vote. If when I vote for you and when you win, you're going to launch policies that are directly opposed to my interest. Why would I do that? That's totally insane. So that's my thoughts on the upcoming midterms. And if Republicans are running on this, then you do not vote for any Republican that says what Roger Marshall just said right there, because that's insane. That's where we'll end it off for today. Thank you so much for watching. Please be sure to go down below and hit like and subscribe here on YouTube. And also be sure to go to my Instagram, X, Spotify, and Substack and give all of those a follow. I'd really appreciate that. And I'll see you guys in the next episode. Have a good one.
It is about who we are. It is about what we believe.
They're building up this case just like we did in Iraq. Build up the war propaganda. There was no Al-Qaeda in Iraq.
The more you tell the truth, the stronger you become.
Mr. Speaker, we're not rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic tonight. We're putting coal in the boiler and setting a course for the iceberg.